Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from whichever part of the world you might be joining us for this Mining API TechTalk and office hours. So I'm going to start by giving you a quick heads up of what's the agenda for today. First, for those who are new joining the sessions, I'm going to give a quick heads up of what this community is all about. Then we'll have Ashwin talk to us about the Apigee Migration Assessment Tool. At the end, we'll have a Q&A for the topic that he had presented to us, and then we'll wrap up with some news and updates we have for you. So again, everyone, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. The Madden API community is this global community who was originated in Madrid by Luis Cuellar and Jimena. Both of them had the intention to make this community an evolving global network for Apigee and application integration enthusiasts for both of these technologies from Google Cloud. And the ultimate goal is for us to empower you to have the community that can give you knowledge sharing, accelerated adoption, and so that you can feel that you have a strong community around the world that you can connect with on these two technologies. So the simple rules for this session is that we'll have either one presentation or two presentation. At this time, we're going to have just one, the one by Ashwin. And at the end, we'll have Q&A. We're going to meet every Thursday with some exceptions. And all of these recordings will be available to you through the Google Cloud community, as well as the decks and other materials you've shared during the session. And again, my call to action, as usual, if you are interested in sharing some topics or demos or use cases that you would like to present with the community, we'll be more than happy to have you joining us. Just reach out to me either via the community or whichever other means of communication you can find. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, and then we can connect to have you be a speaker on this stage. So we're going to be reserving our questions to the end because we have a really in-depth session for today. So I'm going to share with you where you can find the Q&A. You can look for the 3-shape icon in your Google Meet and then go to the Q&A section and then drop it over there. Or you can just share your question through the chat, whichever way works best for you. So now it's time for me to introduce you to our speaker of today. We have Ashwin Naik. He is a senior cloud architect at Google with 11 years of experience, and he has been with Google for almost 4 years, and he's part of the Google PSO specializing in application modernization. And he's going to walk us through the topic of today, the Apigee Migration Assessment Tool. So thank you so much, Ashwin, for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Let me just quickly share my screen. Great. So before we get into what the assessment tooling is about, let's just look at how Apigee can be deployed at this point in time, and what are the flavors that are available in general, right? So if you look at the slide right here, we have Apigee X and Apigee Hybrid. These are called X-based systems, and these are primarily linked to GCP. The way they're linked is this way, right? So Apigee X is a managed platform for hosting your APIs. When I say managed, what that means is the management plane is hosted and managed by GCP, and so is the runtime plane. So for those who are not aware of what the management plane and runtime plane differences are, so management plane is where you have the hosting of the UI, the management API, and the analytics and stuff. And runtime plane is basically the actual containerized service that lets you basically host, deploy your APIs, and then actually execute your APIs, right? Now, the other flavor within the X-based system is Apigee Hybrid, wherein you have the management plane hosted on GCP, but the runtime plane is hosted in your own environment, or basically it's managed by you. It could be on GCP, it could be on any Kubernetes supported platform, what we support, right? It could be on AWS, Azure, or it could be even on-prem, right? But the idea of using Apigee Hybrid is to basically keep the API runtime closer to your backend if you have latency sensitive APIs and you want to make sure that your latency requirements are met, which may not be supposedly met using an Apigee X based system. And the other variant is the edge based. So we do have two flavors, but I've only highlighted one. So one is Apigee OPDK, which is also called the Edge Private Cloud. And here, as it clearly shown, the management plane as well as the runtime plane sits in the customer managed environment. There is also Apigee Edge SaaS, which was a fully managed service. Well, we don't actively sell that anymore, but that's a fully managed Edge offering. But that's where the management as well as the runtime plane is both managed by Google. Just that you would be given access to a UI where you can go and configure your APIs and just configure the load balancing and all of that stuff, right? The key difference between the Edge and X-based system here is specifically with the OPDK is in OPDK, both the runtime and the management plane is managed by the customer, which means you don't need to have any connectivity to the internet whatsoever. So if you were a fully private air-gapped customer, and you could basically run OPDK without any access to the internet. Well, Apigee Edge SaaS is hosted in the cloud, which is a bit different. But both are based off of the Edge variant, right? They are primarily VM-based deployments. Now that I've established the various deployment options, now let's come to why we need to migrate Apigee, right? So as I've established in the previous slide, we have a previous generation, as we call it, the Apigee Edge. We have the public cloud, which is the SaaS, Apigee Edge for public cloud and Apigee Edge for private cloud. And we have the current generation that is Apigee X based, which are native to GCP, and Apigee X, the SaaS offering, and Apigee Hybrid, the semi-managed offering, where the runtime runs on wherever the customer wants to run. And we, from Google PSO, or in general, we've heard from the sales teams that there are several customers who are wanting to migrate from Apigee Edge to Apigee X based systems. There may be several reasons to this. Now, the reasons might be something like this, right? So first of all, let's start from the rightmost side. So there is a newer set of features and newer set of abilities what are only available in the X side of things, and customers are always wanting to look at something newer features. Probably they want to build a API ecosystem which is more AI centric. Right now, the X and the hybrid based systems are more gelled together in a manner where you can easily integrate with your AI ecosystem as well, right? So it's essentially aligning on the feature parity of the Edge with the future X and hybrid roadmap, navigating through product and roadblock issues. So we've heard this from a lot of customers where, okay, fine, they're trying to assess, they want to migrate from Edge to X, and they're hitting roadblocks because there's something which was working in Edge, but it's not working in hybrid or X anymore, right? So that's the part which constantly bugs a lot of our customers, right? It's a time-consuming endeavor. What that means is, now if you have an Edge-based system which has huge number of APIs and you're not able to figure out how to plan it, you're not able to figure out what can work as is, what requires refactoring, right? So, and doing all of this manually is a huge task, right? Imagine if you have 1,000 proxies and you would have to inspect each and every proxy one by one, unpack it, look at the proxy bundle. You're not able to, it's not scalable. Unless you have a huge team and who's well aware of Apigee, it's just going to be a task forever, right? So, and now let's say you've been able to identify a pattern, and let's say you have understood what has to be done, and then it comes about, okay, I need to probably take this proxy bundle and try to transform it to modify the XMLs. But what do I need to transform it to? What are the changes I need to do, right? So it's the one part is analysis. Then the next part is what do you do after you do the analysis, and how do you scale it across the various number of objects you have. The other thing is the product feature differences, right? So there are a lot of migration incompatibilities, anti-patterns, right? We have several edge policies which are no longer available in X, right? Now, how do I replace? How do I replace and make the functionality same? Plus, we don't have any automation at this point, right? We have several customers who want to migrate, and there could be different migration sources. There could be customer who's using Edge SaaS, or there could be a customer who would be using OPDK, or there could be a customer who would want to move from X to hybrid or hybrid to X. There could be reasons such as, fine, they used X, but they think they want to keep the runtime closer to the customer. So we have customers who do a hybrid approach where they have X as well as Apigee hybrid, where X serves as a gateway for the APIs which are hosted on GCP, whereas a hybrid is being used as a gateway for APIs which are hosted elsewhere, right? So there are several, if you look at the slide, this basically gives you an awareness of why acceleration is needed when you're about to take it the migration journey as such. Right now, what's the solution, right? So there are two things when it comes to migration. One is obviously the planning. This has to be a planned activity because you are dealing with probably live traffic, right? Your Apigee setup might be basically helping a lot of your customers reach to the APIs, and then if you want to move to a newer version of Apigee, how would you deal with the traffic? How would you deal with when the actual cutover happens and all of that stuff? Now, even before this, there has to be an entire planning exercise wherein I need to basically look at my source system and try to look at the orgs, environments, APIs, shared flow, environment configurations, products, apps. So there'll be so much of these objects. And how can I map them to resources directly on Apigee X, right? So this is where the migration assessment tool comes in. What it essentially does is it looks at the source system, the blue box over here, and it'll try to export the artifacts from the Apigee, Edge, SaaS, OPDK X, or hybrid systems. Once it takes a full dump, and the dump would be like the entire, your org environment data, your API shared flow data. So when I'm telling API and shared flow, what I mean is the entire proxy bundles, not just the API metadata, right? We're talking about XML files, looking at the policy usage, right? Then the environment configuration, which is like, KVMs, key stores, cache, flow hooks, etc. Then there are the developer related stuff, right? API products, developers, apps. Now, why do we need all of this analysis, right? Because there is a lot of interdependency among each of these components. Like, for example, if you want to have an API product migrated to Apigee X, you would also have to have the API which is used in the API product migrated to Apigee X. So and similarly, if there's a developer that needs to be migrated along with his apps, the products need to be in place, the APIs needs to be in place. And all of these would fall under the umbrella of the Apigee org. So you'd have to establish your org, you'd have to basically get in all these components exported from one system and then move them across. When you move them, will they work as is? No, because of the reasons what I mentioned in the previous slide. Now, what you do that time is you need to basically think of two ways. You try to do things. Let's say you have a smaller footprint, it's easy. Let's say you have like 10 APIs or something, it's going to be very easy. Now, if you're thinking of a scale of thousands, 2000s, we have a lot of customers who are having APIs in the scales of 5,000 and 6,000, right? And that's going to be huge effort. So this is where the migration assessment tool will come in and do an automated discovery and generate a qualification report. It also does automated artifact transformation. I'll tell you what that is. And then let's say I have all the dump. I then have to make sure it works in the X world. Now, how do I do it? So I can actually validate it against the green box here, right? So with that, I will generate a report which has been validated against an X-based system for a source in the Edge and the X-based system, and it will give you a report. Now, if you're looking at how you can typically run this tool is something like this. You basically, it's a self-service tool, right? So you basically take in, it's been open sourced, by the way. I'll show you the details of the repository and everything. So you basically have to uh, get the tool pulled locally into your system. You'll have to give some details to authenticate into the Edge OPDK system and also to the X and hybrid system. The reason why you need to give credentials to the Edge system is so that it can authenticate into the Edge management APIs. And once you authenticate, so the level of access we are expecting here is a read-only admin access. So that's a built-in role in Apigee Edge. So there's something called as a read-only admin role, which will let you give read access to the entire planet, right? So you basically can then export all the artifacts like APIs, shared flows, environment configurations, etc. Then once I have this dump, I have it pulled it in my local system. Then I need to validate it against the X system, which is why I need access to the X system. Now, when I say validate, what am I doing? So there are a bunch of rules which we have written within the assessment tooling. Like for target servers, we have a bunch of rules against which the assessment happens. But when it comes to an actual assessment against X, so that is specifically for the proxies and the shared flows. So if you're all familiar, the proxy create API has a validation feature built into it without having to actually import the proxy into the Edge system. So that is what we do. We take a raw proxy bundle from the Edge system and we try to validate it against the X system. And the response of the API would be either okay, like I'll be able to, it would give a 200 okay, or it would give you a 4xx error, which gives you the trace of why it's not able to deploy. It could be essentially that you're using a deprecated policy, or it could be an anti-pattern, or the API is descriptive enough to help you figure out what's wrong or what is that you need to do to basically fix an API proxy bundle to make it compatible in the Apigee X world as such, right? So this is how you run the tool. So the gray box here could be your workstation, right? So it could be a virtual machine or it could be a local system where probably you can run a Python or a Docker based script. You could basically pull it and you could run it against the required sources, right? In terms of the current capabilities and roadmaps, right, what we support today is we support a bulk and selective resource export. So you can nitpick what aspects of the Apigee you want to assess. Like you can so if you look at Apigee, there are several objects. There are API, shared flows, developers, apps. So if let's say you only want to do an assessment on, let's say, key value maps, right? You could actually give it as a flag to the tooling, and it will only export the KVMs and do an assessment, right? Next is the assessment and validation report. That's a full-fledged Excel report which has several tabs in it, and which will show you details as to what is missing or what are the things that are being assessed and what is the probable workaround or the resolution for you to be able to migrate it to the Apigee X. So we'll go over this in the demo and I'll cover what all sheets are there. There's an entity relationship visualization. So this is like an HTML file which is generated as an output of the report. And you can basically get a visualization of the relationship between the org environment, which APIs are deployed to which environment, etc. Right, I'll show this to you in the demo as well. So this is exposed by a CLI interface. So the plan is, you can easily run it. There's not much dependency. We've also ensured to package it in a Docker format so that all the dependencies are managed by the Docker image, and you don't have to worry about, you don't have to take too much time to just set up the tool. You can concentrate on actually running the tool, right? Then we have packaged the proxy endpoint splitter and unifier. So what this is so if you're all familiar, if you work with Apigee Edge extensively, you can have n number of proxy endpoints. There's no set limit, but in Apigee X, we have a limit of 10 proxy endpoints. So you cannot have more than 10 proxy endpoints. So we've had a lot of customers who have more than 10 proxy endpoints. Now, what happens is when they try to take a proxy bundle, which has more than 10 proxy endpoints, and you try to import, it will not let you import. So you'd have to find a way to basically split or merge the proxy bundle so that you'll be able to migrate it to Apigee X. So there's a utility which is available in the DevRel, and it's also been integrated into the tool, which will automatically identify proxies above 10 proxy endpoints and try to split and merge them and try to create new proxy bundles and validate it against Apigee X. So ultimately, you will get a proxy bundle out of it, which may be multiple proxy bundles, or it could be a single combined proxy bundle, depending on what logic or how your proxy endpoints are designed, right? So the environment shader. So this is a feature we had kept in mind, you know, because of the API proxy limitations per environment. That has been lifted at this point. So we used to have a limit of 50 plus 10, 50 APIs plus 10 shared flows per Apigee environment. So that no longer exists, but we have a lot of customers who are still in Apigee hybrid probably, and some are in the middle of the journey of OPDK to hybrid migrations. And they're probably using the older version of hybrid, and they still have this limits applied. So we've just kept it until, you know, we are, every customer is probably rolled over to a version which doesn't have this limit anymore, right? We also have a target server validator functionality, which essentially validates if target server is reachable. So what that means is, depending on where you run the tool from, it can essentially extract the target servers from each and every proxy bundle and try to make a socket, connection to the target server, host name and port. And if the socket connection goes to fine, then the report also shows fine, right? So that's what it is. Topology discovery. So this was kept in mind, thinking of the roadmap item, what you see on the right. So this is like Apigee hybrid specific recommendations. We look at the Apigee OPDK topology, and we try to arrive at the Apigee hybrid Kubernetes node configuration, right? Now, let's say I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with OPDK topology. So if you have a 13 node topology, which has 3 zookeepers, 3 Cassandras, how would you reimagine that in an Apigee hybrid world in terms of your node pool configuration, right? So that was the idea behind it. There are some work pending in this area, which is why I've put a little bit of that in the roadmap items, wherein the Apigee hybrid specific recommendations would be something we'll be looking at to add. The other one is migration assessment state persistent using GCS. So we've identified that running this tool takes a longer time for an Apigee org, which has a lot of API objects. Now, let's say for some reason there was a disconnection with the target or the source Apigee system. We want to make sure the next time you rerun the tool, you don't have to start again from scratch. It can just resume from the place where it last stopped, right? So trying to add this functionality so that, it could be like one developer ran the tool, just like how we have the Terraform state functionality, right? If you have a remote state, multiple developers can still use the same state. But if you have the state maintained locally, then it's only applicable to you. So it's something like that, right? A state management aspect. The other one is analytics export assessment. So Edge uses Edge private cloud uses Postgres. Edge SaaS uses Postgres, but it's managed, so you don't have visibility to it. Which is why till this point we've not added this feature, because there's no generic way to access both the systems. The reason why we are tapping into the analytics data is to inspect headers that are being used. And there are some headers which are not allowed in general in the X world. So we'll try to basically put that in the report so that you would be aware and you can have that planned when you're actually doing your migration or planning your migration. Yeah. The last bit is the Edge TPS analysis, where we look at your TPS trends and try to give out some sizing recommendations based on that. Right. So these are the current set of capabilities and the roadmap. Impacts and benefits of the migration tool: faster time to market, cost efficiency, operational excellence, customer satisfaction. So I'll just skip through the slide and let's go to the demo directly. Okay, so I don't know if everyone has seen this repository. So this is the open source repository wherein we have the assessment tooling. So you can have it run in two ways. You can have it run locally or using a Docker environment, right? So if you were to run it locally, there are some prerequisites. You'd have to install Python. You'd have to install the Python libraries. You'd have to install GraphViz. There's a link to how to install it. The way I'm going to run it is using Docker, because I find that easier and convenient, and I don't have to worry about dependencies and whatnot. Right. So let me start with the very first step, right? Let me try to pull the Docker image which has been built. So if I go over here, oops, one second, I think I accidentally stopped sharing. Right. So if I go over here and if I paste the command, so I have pulled the migration image. Now let me go back to this tab and let's look at what the next step are. So now what I've done is I've pulled the package. I basically have the Docker image for the assessment tooling available. Next is, as I said, for Apigee Edge SaaS, if you're using this as the source, you need read-only admin. So I already have access to the Apigee environment. I've already configured all these roles. And similarly for Apigee X also, I have an environment and I've configured all these roles. Next is, let's say, yeah, this I'm just covering the usage of the tool, the way you have to run the tool. I'll just skip through this. So I have to create an input.properties file. And in this input.properties file, I will have to give these details. You can, I have also put a sample input.properties file here. So if you look at this file, it has all the information that you need to run the tool. Now, if I am heading here back to my terminal, I have an input.properties which I've already filled. So if you look at the source URL, I'm actually using the management API URL of the Edge SaaS. I have a Apigee org called demo 1337. I'm using source auth type as OAuth. So we support multiple auth types. So it's going to be either, if you look at the table here, it's going to be either basic or OAuth. Now we have certain customers who are using basic authentication in Edge still, but we also have some customers who are using OAuth. So depending on what authentication mechanism you are using, you can just switch it to that. Then the source UI URL. So this is not absolutely important for the assessment tool to run. So this is just so that when the visualization is generated, it will actually have an hyperlink to the resource. So I'll show that to you when we run the tooling. And the reason why we've exposed it is when you actually look at the visualization, and this differs. It may not differ for a Apigee Edge SaaS environment, but when you're using Edge OPDK, you would have your own UI URL, right? So which is why it has been exposed. Source Apigee version is SaaS. We support these options. So it's OPDK, SaaS, or X or hybrid. Now, since I am using Apigee Edge SaaS, I have chosen SaaS. Target URL is the target against which I'm going to do the assessment. The reason why this has been exposed is Apigee X and hybrid now supports data residency. The URLs for data residency are different than the usual Apigee URL. So there'll be a region. It'll be something like US hyphen whatever prepended to the target URL, which is why I have exposed it. So which means if you are using Apigee X environment, which is data residency enabled, you can basically configure it here, right? Next is the GCP project ID. So this is the project ID which hosts your Apigee org. Now, I have had a lot of questions come in. So why do I need Apigee X to actually do the assessment? So this is where, if you remember from the slides, I mentioned about validation. So we do the actual validation against an actual Apigee org. And that is required because we are going to call the management API against this particular org. This can be a trial org. It can be a pagey org. It could be a subscription org. As far as the management API endpoint is accessible and authenticated, this will work. GCP environment type. So this is a option we've kept. You can leave it as is. I'm thinking of hiding it behind so that you don't have to worry about these inputs anymore. But at this point, you can just leave it to whatever is defaulted. Again, this particular API URL is for the the visualization. When I'll show you the visualization, you'll understand why the references are here. The target directory is where the API proxy bundles get exported, and you can see it here once I start running the tool. The other inputs, you can leave them as is. You can just override them if you think you want to override them. It's basically the names of the files which get generated once the assessment is complete, right? Now, okay, now that I am pretty sure you'll have a lot of questions here. We can cover that once I get through the demo. So fine, I have basically explained you the input.properties I've created. Now let's generate the Edge SaaS auth token, right? So since I'm using Edge SaaS and I'm using OAuth, so I've already created a script which has the API call to generate the OAuth token. And I've already authenticated my terminal with the Edge username and password. Let me just run this and let me authenticate against my Apigee Edge. So the command that I need to do is I basically have to just do this. Right? So it's the same thing, right? So Edge, and if I go here, so right. So I have configured my source auth token. Next what I need is the Google auth token. This is for the target so that you can authenticate your GCP environment. Let me just do this. All right. So now what I've done is I have pulled my Docker image. I have created my input. I have authenticated. I've given all the credentials it needs. The next thing, all I need to do is I just need to do the Docker run. Since I'm not doing local run, I can ignore this. So I'll just copy this command and try to run it here. Now you can see that the assessment tool is starting to run, right? So if you look at this, it has started exporting all the APIs and the shared flows. It is exporting the API bundles. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, you can see a folder created. It has exported the API proxies. It is starting to export the environment-specific details. You can also see the shared flows over here. Right, so this will take a little bit of time, depending on how many APIs you have. My environment is not that big, so this should start and should be done pretty quickly. Now, what it has happening right here is it's basically exporting from the target as well, and I'll explain you why. You can see here the assessment report has been generated. So let me just go to the output directory and let me just do this so that it is easy for me to access. So let me just open this, open share. So let me first show you the visualization. So this is a visualization which shows you the relationship between Apigee org to Apigee environment. So if you look here, this is the org reference, and this is a hyperlink. So if I click on this, it will redirect me to the the Edge UI. So there are some things which are indicated in red, which means there are some configuration changes which you need to do, right? And similarly here, it is a graph here. So it is giving you the reason of the error. So this is just a visualization to look at. And if you just scroll, then you'll be able to basically get the details of every node as such, right? Now let's go back here. Now let's look at the actual migration qualification report, right? So, okay, it's, right. So this gives you a qualification summary. So there'll be a green indication here. It's not showing because I've just opened it in the Python-based environment. And here, if you look at the summary, it will show you that what is passed, what has failed. What does a failure indicate is you may need to do some changes to be able to move it to the Apigee X environment. So proxies per environment is passed, which means we are good in terms of a number of proxies you have, and it can be easily imported. But that doesn't mean proxies in general are fine. For that, there's another tab. Northbound MTLS, it's failed because the way you configure northbound MTLS in Apigee Edge is different than the way you configure it in X. Companies and developers, it says it's failed. We'll get into that tab. Similarly, the other tabs. Now, if I go to the validation report, you can see here that, so I'm not sure why it's not indicating this. Right. So if you look at this, this is basically showing all the list of different resources, right? Flow hooks, developers, apps. And now if you look at this, this is an API. It's telling you the error as to why it cannot be imported. And it tells you which file you need to change and what is the error, right? So similarly, you can find these details for every API out there. Some APIs can be imported, you will find the true flag, but some may not be, right? So in this case, right, statistics collector, that's no longer valid in Apigee X because that proxy has been deprecated, right? So details like this would basically give you a understanding of what are the number of APIs which I can migrate as is and how many of them I would have to change. Now, moving to org level resources, I don't have any org level resources. The reason why we have this tab is because we don't allow org level resources at Apigee X or Apigee Hybrid. Proxy unifier, there are no proxies with more than 10 proxy endpoints, which is why this particular tab is empty. Aliases with private keys. So we've indicated these as red because these have private keys in the key store, and we don't allow exporting key store from Apigee Edge. You can export certificate because it's not sensitive, but private keys, it doesn't let you. We'll deal with questions around how you can, basically address this. Proxies per environment is good. I explained you this. This is again considering, that limit. If you don't have this limit, then you don't have to actually be bothered. But we do have limits, like, you need to have about 4,000 odd APIs or something. The limits keeps on changing. You probably have to look at the official product documentation as to how to handle it. Northbound MTLS, in Apigee Edge, if you have to configure MTLS, all you need to do is configure the Apigee virtual host. We don't have virtual host in Apigee Hybrid or X. We have something called as environment group. And in the environment groups, all you get to configure is the host name. So the certificates have to be configured outside of Apigee, and that has to be configured in the load balancer, whichever you're using. You could be using Google Load Balancer, or it could be using your own load balancer. So it separately, and you'd have to deal with it yourself. Company and developers. So there's no exact, company feature, but we have a replacement. It's called app groups, and we don't support, direct migration from companies to app groups. In terms of the anti-patterns, this has listed some anti-patterns. So you are basically getting an understanding of what the report covers and how this may help you in, getting your migration journey started. There are several other tabs, but I want to open the forum for any Q&A because we have 15 minutes. So the forum is open. Do we have any questions?
We have one question, Ashwin. Let me read it to you. It's by Roman. He's asking, does this tool only analyze and generate reports, or does it actually perform the migrations, proxies, SFs, KVMs, etc.?
Right. So this is assessment only. For migration, you can be looking at, you taking the data which has been exported. So if you look at the, the dump that is generated, you can basically, use a Maven or some other tooling. You can also use Apigee CLI as well. So if you look at the export dump, these are in the format which are compatible with Maven. That was kept in mind. So you can essentially use a separate tooling. But as a part of this tooling, all we are doing is we are giving you the assessment report. Now, why is that important? I've covered it in the deck. It just helps you with planning your migrations, and it will give you incompatibility details, and it will help you fix the proxies before you have to start migrating them to Apigee X.
Thank you, Ashwin. That was the only
Thank you.
question. Go ahead, sorry.
I just said thank you for the answer.
Great. Any questions on how to run the tool or the options? Because I've had questions from the community around, what are the inputs? Why do I need so much inputs? In general, do you have any questions around that, or the assessment report in general, if you want me to cover anything?
We've got another question from Roman. In case of deprecated policies like aesthetics collector, will your tool suggest possible workarounds or replacements?
Yes. So if I show you the unsupported policy, so this is the unsupported policy tab, and like statistics collector, the replacement is data capture policy, right? Similarly, the other unsupported policies have references to what you can potentially replace them with. So this is what we get, right? But it's not a one-on-one mapping. The configuration of statistic collector policy and the configuration of data capture policy is different, but it will help you achieve what you wanted to achieve using the statistics collector. I think the most
Thank you.
important.
We've got another one. Can you share the Docker file you used to build the image?
It's public. So this is public. So let me put the tooling in the chat. So you can just do a Docker pull. You can access the repository from here. And if you go all the way to the README, you can basically do the Docker pull, right? So it is a GHCR package. So it's public, so it's not restricted or anything. So you can do a pull yourself.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Also, we appreciate your feedback in the probably we may not be able to assess every permutation combination because every customer is different, every environment is different. And we've identified or encountered issues while we run it for different customers. So if at all you're ever encountering an issue, feel free to raise a GitHub issue, and we will try to look at the issue as soon as possible. Right.
Thank you, Ashwin. I think that's pretty much from question we got in the Q&A, but if anyone wants to pop another question, please feel free to raise your hand. Alrighty, everyone. Then Ashwin, I think we're ready to start wrapping up the session. What do you think?
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we request your kind feedback. I'm gonna open the poll right now so that you can say how satisfied you were with this event. You can take a look at the three-shape icon in your Google Meet and then go to polls and then give us your feedback over there. So from the latest articles we have for you, you can also take a look at this article by Ashwin, which is like a introductory part of what you just saw in this session. You can also take a look at the Networking Blueprints article by Itsaso, and also Application Load Balancer with Apigee Hybrid by Rajesh. And lastly, by Chris Duncan, you can take a look at how to serve Hugging Face models from Vertex AI through Apigee. And we look forward to welcoming you next week at our application integration roadmap sessions. We're going to be having sessions in each of the region, one for the American continent. You can join us at 1 p.m. EDT. Then for the EMEA region, you can join us at 10 a.m. CET. And then for the Asia Pacific region, we see you on March the 20th at 5 p.m. Australia time. So I'll leave you the links for these sessions in the chat so that you can register and join us. This is going to be a session where you get a sneak peek at the roadmap and the features that are coming along for application integration and from what you can expect at Google Cloud Next. So we hope to see you there next week. And as usual, we see you for the same time and same hour for Marine API office hours. And thank you, Ashwin, so much for the presentation you gave us today. I'll make sure I'll share all the resources with the community. And I'll see you everyone next week.